Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this edition of the Weekend Wrap Up. It is March, Josh.
It
March
is
the 1st.
March. We've moved to another month. Yes, we
Wow, man,
have.
this year's already starting to pick up some steam and moving fast. And I heard just a few minutes ago that next week we spring forward with our
Spring
time.
forward. Yeah, time change. Could this be the last time change? Could this be the year that
I
they
don't know.
finally kill that pointless daylight savings things that we've
I'll
had
just
going
leave it.
on forever?
Yeah.
So it's passed through Congress at some level a couple times recently and just didn't
Trump
get the
hadn't made an
final step.
executive order yet, has he?
No, not yet. But
That's the only one he hadn't done.
This could be the year it happens. We'll see.
All right. Well, let's before we dive into this week, Josh,
Yep.
let's hear from our sponsor, Dennis Young Insurance. We appreciate Dennis Young and his team. Let's hear a word from him, and we'll be right back.
Yep.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 19...
All righty, welcome back into the Weekend Wrap Up. Josh, we got a lot to cover today. I'm going to let you just dive right into it.
We had a very busy week, and we're going to do what we did last week, which we're going to jump right to the top story rather than dragging this out and burying the lead. So We're going to start with last night. Friday night, we had a county study session on the possibility of a county wastewater authority. This was at 5:15 last night at the historic courthouse in the main big room. Expectation was that there was going to be a big crowd, which is why they moved it to the room. Honestly, it was less turnout than I expected, but we had 17 of our 18 county commissioners there, and our county attorney was there for part of it, plus IT staff and all that. So even though the crowd in the room wasn't huge, it would have been tight in that committee room. So I'm glad we were in there. So yeah, it worked out good.
It was good to see it live streamed as well.
It was good to see it live streamed. It was a live stream went great. I went back and we'll play some clips a bit. I watched a little bit of it again this morning, and all that part worked good. We had the property committee brought in 3 experts. Actually, they brought in 2, and a third one got brought in for them, but that's all right. We ended up with 3. So we had from the state, we had the expert from MTAS, which is the municipal technical assistance people at the state. Normally, because this was a county event, you'd bring in an expert from CTAS, which is the county side, but as the guy explained, so few counties are in the wastewater business. There is no county expert on this. So this was the guy. He fills in on the county side when needed. So he gave his opinion. We had 2 gentlemen there from TDEC, which is the state authority on water, wastewater, and all things, what we were discussing. And then we have Mr. John Freeman from Shelbyville Power, and he would be our local authority on wastewater. He runs our city water system and our wastewater in the city. If there's anybody in Bedford County that knows more about wastewater, I'd be surprised. He's our guy locally. So we had two state experts, 1 local expert. And the probably the longest presentation, and the one that had the most information that I learned the most anyways, was the TDEC gentleman that was there. He gave us about a 45-minute presentation on what a step system is, how it works, and then some research that they had done last year on the currently operating step systems in Tennessee. What a step system is, it's a wastewater system. There's 4 components. You've got a tank at each house. That's the initial place that your wastewater goes to. Then you've got a collection system that collects it from multiple houses, takes it to a secondary treatment system, which he showed a couple images of those. It looked like a little shed or a building that had some pumps in it. And then it goes out into what's called a land application area, which that's your field. That's your area of dirt where you disperse the wastewater over time. So it's done using what's called a drip dispersal. And one of the examples he gave is that on an acre of good dirt, good soil, you could put 11,000 gallons of wastewater out onto that soil per day, which covers about 36 houses.
Right.
So that's kind of how the system works. It collects all together, goes out through a pump, and then there's a series of tubes that just run through the dirt.
Right. He showed
And
that picture from overhead.
From
you
overhead.
could see.
You can literally see where
the
the tubes
lines,
are in the
yeah.
ground, because as you can imagine, wastewater coming out of the dirt, suddenly those are more fertilized. You've got lines of green grass.
If you go to Google Earth and you pull up, if you have a resident out and you have a septic system, you can pull up an overhead view and zoom down, and you can see most of the time you can see your septic.
You can see where it's
the
at.
field lines.
Yeah, you can see where it's at. So the actual study that he had done, that the state did back in January of 2024, they surveyed all 400 of the currently over 400 active step systems in the state of Tennessee. 49% of those were working as they were supposed to, had no issues, so right at half. 25% though, so 1 in 4 had minor issues, but even more disturbing, 1 in 4 had major issues. And a major issue is it was pumping wastewater. Basically, with your naked eye, you could see raw sewage sitting on top of the ground.
And I'm going to venture to say, Josh, that the 49% that had no issues were newer systems.
Possibly. Now, they didn't break that down.
That's just me thinking that this 49% is going to shift into these other two eventually, because I just think with time,
you're more likely to have issues, I think. But that was not a stat that he had. So you got to understand that, again, you got 400 of them. About 100 of them had a major issue already. So as they surveyed him in January of 2024.
Right.
So what he told us, which this was new information, this is part of why we had a study session, is we got new information. We had been looking at establishing a county wastewater authority to oversee if more of these got brought into the county. We currently have like 4 or 5 of those. I've heard a floating number on that. I've heard 4 for a while. Somebody mentioned 5 last night. We've got a very small number of those currently in the county. At least 2 of those are schools. We've got Cascade and community are on step systems. The Fire Academy, I think, is on a step system.
There's one townhome development.
There's a townhome development across from Nearest Green, and I'm not sure where the other one is. But there's talk that there may be a 5th one. But either way, we've got 5. So the look had been to get this county wastewater authority, and what we'd been hearing for the last month or so was, we need this, we need this, we need this. Growth is coming. We've got to oversee them. But the new information, which we're going to play clip 1 here from TDEC, is that there's actually 3 different ways to regulate these systems, so we don't necessarily have to do this authority. Right. And let's hear from the expert on what the 3 options are.
The 3 mechanisms I'm aware of, one is through a utility district. That's how Consolidated did. I think their county commission back in the 90s, 97 or something, passed a resolution requiring any public sewer in the county be provided by Consolidated Utility District, and it supported their charter to add wastewater to their charter. They only had a charter for water. So some handle it through their utility districts. Others have formed a water and wastewater authority, like Wilson County, Dixon County, and I think Hamilton County. Some have had more stringent regulations and some don't. I think Hamilton County does at this point. The third way is through planning and zoning. So Williamson County handles it somehow through their planning and zoning. They have a pretty, you would have to reach out to Williamson County Planning and Zoning to completely understand it, because I don't. But there's certain lot sizes for certain developments. They can still use decentralized systems, but it might not reduce the size of the lot that they have to have for that particular development. They also Williamson County requires 100% reserve area. So in the example me and you talked about, if they needed 2 acres, then that developer has to provide 4. So there's 2 acres to fix it at some point in the future. Sevier County has 100%. But anyway, those are the 3 mechanisms, either through utility district, water and wastewater authority, or
All right, so 3 options, not 1. They discussed a little bit all 3 options last night. In particular, the first option, which is a whole utility district, that's kind of, nobody has the appetite for that here in the county. That would involve creating an entire entity that would then actually run wastewater, which eventually will get into a sewage treatment plant. The initial expert that spoke from MTAS said he's got a a county or a municipality that's looking at doing that right now. And I
Cost.
want to say the dollar amount he threw out
Yeah.
was $26 or $28 million
Right.
for one that only processed 2 million gallons a day. And
Yeah.
that was literally just for the facility. That's not for running the lines under the
Right.
ground. That's not for anything. That was just for the actual facility that processed the wastewater.
I think if you just look at that, I think, and this is just me speaking for what the public would say, is that there's no way we can afford that. We can't stand any more property tax increases. So
Right. And, we've got schools we need to build.
Yes.
So do we want to really be building a wastewater facility instead of a school? So I think everybody was pretty much on the same page. Option number one was off the table.
Right.
Option two is the option that they've been looking at, which is the county wastewater authority. He mentioned a couple options there, a couple counties that have done that, I believe Wilson County and Hamilton County. And that is one option. That's one way to go. Some of the downsides, which was discussed extensively at the meeting last night. Once they set up that authority, which is the direction they're headed right now, or at least the discussion right now, that authority then becomes the authority on wastewater. So the county commission would set up that board. They would pick the initial members of that board. But at that point, that board has full control over wastewater. That board sets their own bylaws. That board sets all the rules. That board does it all. And at that point, the county commission is over here to the side, and they can't come in and dictate to that board what they can do.
It sets up a political favors system. It sets up the opportunity for selectiveness and favoritism and all that. If you have that board, it ends up being a self-perpetuating situation. Now, I understand that the commission would appoint these members.
They would have the say on the front end.
But then once it gets going, it's over.
Once it's going, the trains are going down the tracks and it's over. Now, some of the plus side I heard on that was the idea behind this was to set up that board, have them contract out with Consolidated Utility out of Rutherford County, who already operates these step systems, and have them do the actual work, boots on the ground work. But Consolidated Utility ain't working for free.
No.
So you've got to, as the initial guy said from MTAS, you've got to put some seed money into this wastewater authority to get it going to start with. After that, it could collect fees from developers, from the homeowners that end up having these step systems. And it would be a fee-based system that would be just like any other utility would be, where they would have to live within the means of their own budget. It wouldn't take taxpayer money past that. But again, you've got a standalone authority over here setting their own rules, doing their own thing, and they're overseen by the state, but they're no longer overseen by the county. So they're
but basically what that would be doing would be not operating, but managing and regulating mass failure. Because if you look at the step systems that's across the state of Tennessee, that's mass failure based on TDEC's numbers.
Currently 25%. Yeah.
Well, I mean, honestly, 50.
Well, 50%
minor and then major.
Yeah.
I mean, the 25. I'm telling you, they're all going to shift into major if something's not done on these right here to rebuild, and it's costly to do it.
Yeah.
So we've got rules and regulations in place right now.
Okay,
so let's 1 acre, 1 lot.
Yeah, we do in the county. Let's get into rules and regulations real quick. The TDEC guy, which he was pretty open and forthcoming, he said, and he was asked this twice by 2 different commissioners, the current regulations at the state on step systems are inadequate. TDEC has been trying since 2017 to get what he considers a reasonable level of regulation. And developers have so much power in the state of Tennessee that they've shut it down every time. So unfortunately, your representatives sitting in the state house right now at the legislature, at our Tennessee House and our Tennessee Senate, are more beholden to those developer dollars than they are to the people that elect them into office, which is a sad state of affairs. But he came out and pretty much said it.
It's the mindset of more rooftops equals more tax dollars.
Yeah.
That's the mindset that we see.
Yeah.
And also, there's other things going on.
Well, yeah, there may or may not be money changing hands, but we don't know anything about that.
But it sets itself up for that. And that's the problem.
Yeah. And so the third way to regulate this, which he mentioned there in a clip, is you just set your planning and zoning regulations in such a way that you get your step regulations in with planning and zoning. And the example he gave, which I think some of the commissioners are going to look more into, is Williamson County. So here you've got Williamson County doing it one way. We've got Wilson and Rutherford County doing it a different way. If I look at those three counties, I'm kind of thinking I like how Williamson County looks a little
Yes.
better. Why don't we go follow what they're doing instead of following what Murfreesboro
Their
and
standards are just a little bit higher, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out when you drive through.
Right. Yeah, you can look at it. Now, the flip side argument that was mentioned at the meeting, and I also heard it sidebar, was, hey, it's going to cost the county a bunch of money if we run this all through planning. It's going to cost, we're going to need to have some experts in step systems and soil and whatnot.
If we allow step systems.
Well, if we allow, and whether or not we allow, maybe we need some more people. I can tell you that the way this should be handled, if it's done, if the math works, and they set it up correctly, is your fees you get from your developers as they bring in the development should cover the costs of all this
Additional
planning.
help.
Yeah. At the city level, I know because I'm there and am on the budget, keep an eye on it now. We are adjusting our planning and our codes fees. I think I've seen them in the last year or so. They've definitely been adjusted once. They may have been adjusted twice. They continually are looking at that and making sure that the fees that were coming in are offsetting the expense for us to have codes guys out inspecting properties, for us to have planning people looking at plats and everything. So you just got to get your fees up to where you're covering those expenses. And that's how you would handle that on the zoning side. So just a quick, well, this won't be very quick, but going off in a little bit different direction on this, we had our local expert, Mr. Freeman from Shelbyville Power, came in and spoke on some of the particular challenges we have here in Bedford County in bringing these kind of step systems in. And I always like John. He's always straightforward and tells you like it is. So we're going to hear from him for a minute, hear what he has to say about trying to bring a step system into Bedford County.
All right.
Yeah, so the number one problem we have in this county, and if anybody's got a farm or farming, we have to put a lot of lime on our ground. The reason for those purposes, because we got underlying bedrock. Due to that underlying bedrock, we have a lot of karst topography, which means sinkholes. Water typically migrates along that rock surface. And typically above that, we have a stratosphere of clay layer above it. And in most of our county, we have a very thin topsoil layer. So the gentleman that was from Wheel here, I can tell you right now, I live out there. I got rock all the way from the surface down to 3 feet down, and then it's solid. Unionville is a lot of areas like that. Unless you're around areas that are focused around the river, there are deeper pockets of soil around those areas. That's typically where you see our prime farmland. You don't have to add as much lime, just add a little fertilizer and the crops grow better. The reason a lot of these septic systems are failing is because of overloading rate. So the only true way to stop the overloading is decrease the density. Decreasing density reduces your loading rate, or you increase your loading zone of the area that you're dedicating. And I know he was discussing, and y'all heard him talk about consolidated over there. 50%, 100%, what's wrong with 200%? If this is going to be something that's going to be in place 500, 1,000 years and always going to be needed, why do you want to sacrifice or bind yourself to some little point and say somebody's going to go out here and buy something later? Get what you need up front, set a lot more stringent regulations, set your loading rates a lot different, set your soil criteria a lot different. In Bedford County, you may have a pocket and you may got to drive 5 miles to get to a soil area that's adequate for that, and that's fine.
Wow.
He tells it like it is. I love John Freeman.
Yeah.
Those percentages he was talking about, we didn't get into those before. If you do one of these systems where you have that land application area, the general, as we got the percentages, eventually these things fail, or a portion of them can fail. So you've got to have whatever acreage of good soil you have, you've got to have a backup set of soil that you can move your pipes over to.
Right.
So there is no good state regulation on that. They recommend 50% of your area. So if you need 2 acres to do a development, they recommend you keep an extra acre over to the side just in case. There's a lot of areas that have already upped their requirement to 100%. So if you need 2 acres to make it work, you need to have an additional 2 acres. As John said there, you're talking about building a house that's going to be there for a long time. Now, I don't know that any houses built today are going to last 500 or
Yeah.
1,000 years. I'm just saying construction isn't what it used to be. But if you're looking long term, you may want to look at 200% of backup area. So if you need 2 acres for this piece of land, you might want to keep 4 acres off to the side. So keeping standards high is important, and then keeping our zoning where it is as far as lot sizes. If we keep the current county regulation that we've been working on, which we've been working at, which is 1 acre per house, and that acre has to perk for a septic tank, you're not going to get a big development of 500 houses because nobody's going to want to go through all the effort to put in 500 septic tanks. And there was some talk about, if you bring in a neighborhood of 25, they may try to squeeze a step system in there. If all 25 lots perk, the cost of the step system to run for 25 houses is going to be so exorbitant that you're just going to do the septic tank.
But I've heard developers. I've talked to somebody about this once before. It's been several years ago, and I'd made the statement, well, if the land don't perk, you don't need to be built. Oh, well, we can put a step system there. So it's basically to avoid the perk situation. And I was explained that the step system will make it to where it doesn't matter if the land perks. We're going to create a system where it doesn't have to perk, but it still has to perk based on everything I've seen through the presentation.
You still have to have the proper soil that they
Right.
can run these fields to let the wastewater out. So, and also another thing he mentioned in that clip was in Bedford County, the only areas that have that kind of good soil is where we've got farmland now. So do we want to be shutting down our farms so we can bring in big neighborhoods? I don't, and I don't think a lot of the county commission does either. So,
What we do today, 50 years from now, our people that are coming behind us, our
Right.
ancestors, if that's what you want to call them,
Mhm.
our kids and our grandkids they're going to suffer the consequences or reap the rewards, one or the other.
Yeah. So the final outcome of this particular meeting was the committee voted unanimously to send this back to the county commission with an unfavorable recommendation. There will be an actual more discussion and a vote a week from Tuesday at the county commission. We'll obviously be there and we'll cover what goes on there. Just my gut feeling is there was one commissioner that on the floor offered that he'd tried to rewrite this to make it more palatable. I would expect there might be one more attempt to push this through with different language that removes some of the more controversial items about eminent domain and operating, and that they may still managing. They may still try to go down this path, but I would say just my personal opinion, I don't get a vote in this on the county. Now that we saw that there were 3 options to handle this, to me, the third option, which is one Williamson County is operating on, seems like the better of the 3 options. It maintains county control over these systems. It keeps it within zoning. You don't have this separate entity over here that's doing its own thing that the county no longer has control over. I think that it does bring additional costs into planning and zoning, but I think you can cover those costs with fees to developers, which doesn't then reach into taxpayers' pockets and cost us any tax dollars. So that's my opinion. That's what we saw. We'll see what happens a week from Tuesday, and we'll cover it at that time. So moving on, had a lot more that went on this week. Monday night, the city council, mayor, city attorney, there was a bunch of us there, a few people from the press, took a tour of the new Riverview district. This is the corner of the square. I guess this would be the southwest corner of the square, where currently we city just approved money to expand the parking lot in front of the Fly. A lot of money. I think we're at $600,000 there, which is only adding 30 parking spaces. But in addition to the parking spaces, they're moving there's a big ditch there. They're moving the gas lines right now. They're also eventually going to be burying the power lines and the fiber lines and everything. So all the overhead wires are going away to make it look pretty.
That's $20,000 a parking spot.
Well, I think most of that cost is not those parking spaces, but it's getting those wires that are hanging up there.
We're having to do that, though, to make the parking spaces.
Well, we're doing that just to make it look pretty.
Okay. All right.
We want it to look pretty.
Right.
When you're sitting on a rooftop, do you want to be looking out through power lines to see the river?
Really.
No. It's
Okay.
So that's the goal. And so this is phase 1 going on right now. Eventually in phase 2, we got some maps. The parking area will be quite a bit more larger and wrap all the way up around the corner there. And then the portion of the street between what's about to be the Grindstone Cowboy and what is already the Glass Hollow Table, the idea is to turn that into a walking, pedestrian only area. And then you're going to have the Grindstone Cowboy on the corner. You've got Glass Hollow Table on the other corner. And then as you go down that pedestrian street, Grindstone has 3 additional retail spaces available for build out. They don't have a commitment on any of the 3, but they're looking, and so there should be 3 other businesses you walk down the street. And then across from those 3, that back building behind what's currently Glass Hollow Table will be Glass Hollow Tavern. And that will be a bar, obviously, with the name Tavern. So you'll have a bar there. In between the table and the tavern, there's actually outdoor seating. And if that street is pedestrian only, their hope is, and I think hopefully this should be something good that will pass. We'll see when the debate comes around on it, is that they will open that area to seating, and you'll be able to buy drinks and stuff and kind of mingle around in that outdoor area.
Looking at this whole map, will all of this be blocked off, even behind the square, or just to the corner?
Just the corner,
Just that
up to the
one
square. Just that
stretch.
one stretch
The
will be
Spring
blocked
Street
off.
that goes off to the sharp curve,
Yeah,
and it stops there, then
Yeah.
the traffic flow.
That will be
so you can
walkable.
get into the parking lot.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You actually enter the parking lot right behind what is currently, that's about behind where Coffee Break is,
Right.
where you pull into the
Yeah.
parking lot back there in front of the Fly. So that's the concept. They took us into Grindstone Cowboy. That's a neat space. They've got the ground floor is the main coffee bar, but if you keep walking around the corner, also an adult bar there, so you can get adult drinks or coffee drinks. And it's got a small stage and performance area that's on the ground floor. If you go up to the second floor, it's an open performance area with a bigger stage, and it will have bar area there. That would be more like one of the bars if you went to Nashville on Broadway. It's a big open space where they can have a decent sized concert. It's got a green room for the artists. So hopefully they're hoping they can bring in some artists, some decent name artists. And then the neat part is the rooftop. You can actually get up on the rooftop. They'll have a little bar up there. And from there, they took us up there, and you can see quite a ways. I saw a water tower. I don't even know how far away it was, but it was way off in the distance. And you can see the down to the park there, Fisherman's Park. You can see the water going. You can hear the water going over the dam there and everything. So it's a neat area, nice view. And then they've actually got a basement area, and they're talking about putting possibly even a members only speakeasy down in the basement. And they're looking for some type of gimmick. There's one in Nashville. I can't remember the name of it. It's called the Red Phone Booth or something. But there's a phone booth. You walk into in Nashville, you put a particular code into the phone, and the back of the phone booth opens, and you're in a little speakeasy bar there. So they're looking for some kind of gimmick like that to do for this
Okay.
place. So it looks like a neat area. And the date they gave us, which I would not hold them to this date because I've seen a lot of these dates come and go, but they're hoping to be open in July or August for phase 1 of their business. Again, so many things can come up in one of this. I wouldn't hold my breath for July or August, but they're working on it.
Okay.
So, and then the Glass Hollow again, they've got the table part already open, the restaurant in the front. Once the street and everything is done, they're going to build out the back building, put the tavern in there, so you'll have a bar there. So you're going to have a lot of bar action.
Boy, that's
going
going to be
on
a
on these
high
streets.
concentration of
A high
alcoholic
concentration of
beverages
bars,
being
yeah.
served in that southwest corner.
It will,
and it's right on the bluff of the river.
It is.
What could go wrong?
No, nothing could go wrong. And eventually, we will have the river walk there with the overlook, where you can actually walk out on the little.
After
thing
we
and
go
look
from
over
the
the
bars, we take a walk right over the river.
There's railings. I'm sure.
Okay,
and
all right, okay.
Everything will be fine.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right.
So and the actual. So there's still money needed. Phase 2 is going to be discussed at the study session, which is coming up. This
Okay,
week
money
for the city.
needed by the city to do some of this
To
stuff?
finish phase 2 of the Riverview District. Yeah, no idea what a dollar amount is. I think we're going to discuss it Tuesday. I don't think we'll still have a dollar amount then. I think they've got to go out and get some bids. and see
Okay,
what it's
how
gonna
does this
cost.
go in conjunction with the overlook? Is that what you were talking about before?
The overlook is a totally different project
Right.
financed by state grants.
Right.
And when we get into the next week's session today, I can talk about it now, though. We've actually almost running out of time on that grant, and we didn't get it done in time. There were some environmental issues on being that close to the river.
Yeah.
They also had to look into some archaeological issues or whatever. So they're going to ask the state for a 1-year extension on that because there's no way we can meet the current
Right.
deadline, which is August of this year. So Tuesday, I went to a library reception around lunchtime. I have never been in the Shelbyville Bedford Public Library before Tuesday. It looks like a library. It's very
Yeah.
nice. It's very modern. A couple stats they gave us on a little handout was last fiscal year that they had stats on, which ended was 2023, 2024. They had 17,464 library card holders here in the county. 8,970 people came in and attended some kind of a program at the library. 72,935 was the total circulation of books and items that were checked out, electronic items, whatever. 35,617 total visits of people coming through the door there, and 15,000, a little over 15,000 people logged onto their Wi-Fi. So you might say libraries, not, maybe they're dying because the internet and this and that, but we still got a lot of people going to our library. So
you
it's
get
a nice
people that
facility.
don't have
Yeah.
good internet service. A lot of
Yeah.
kids don't have, financially, that access, and this provides access for some of those students. And
They've got a
like they
really
would like-
nice
yeah.
kids room that they've just updated. Actually, they weren't able to show it to us, but they got a big wall size light bright apparently where you can put
Wow.
lights in for the kids to
Okay.
play with. But it's got kids books and play toys, and there was a mom there with two of her kids. She said she loved it. She could just come there with the kids, hang out, the kids could play, they weren't bothering anybody. It's a room with a door. They can close the door so the kids don't run off into the library.
Well, that's
So,
good.
and a lot of study rooms. They had a lot of study rooms. They just recently got a $630,000 Connected Community grant, and they're looking to put in a patio area with Wi-Fi and charging stations. They're going to add what's called a maker space area, which they'll have like a 3D printer where you could send in some kind of a 3D thing and they would print it off for you on one of these 3D printers because those are kind of expensive. You may not have one at home. She did say, don't send in a ghost gun or anything. They're not going to print
They're not
off
gonna
any
do
plastic guns or anything like that at
Okay.
the library. So they're going to screen what they print
Of
off before
course.
they print it. So, but really nice facility. Again, first time I've been there. Hopefully I'll get to go back now. And they're doing good things there. There's a good sized library board that's really active and aggressive and out there in the community.
Yeah.
Part of this grant, they were talking about trying to add Wi-Fi antennas on the exterior corners of the building to see if they could reach out into some of the areas around them, maybe in Shelbyville housing that are kind of lower income areas, and get free Wi-Fi to kids that might need it for studying school projects
Right.
and stuff like that. So a lot of good things going on there. Tuesday evening, same day, I went to the County Financial Management Committee, and this one started early at 3:45 with a study session. This was our big topic last week. They were studying the juvenile detention facility. And magically, we had 7 days from the previous meeting to this meeting, and we found out that maybe we didn't need the $2.4 million that the week before they said we needed. So,
Yeah. So what changed?
the week before, they said we came up short. We had $6 million in the bank for this project, and it was going to cost $2.4 million more, which by my math, that's going to make it $8.4 million. But after a week passed, we came back and the architect was there and our county owner rep, and they said, we've looked at this a little more in the last week, and if we were to just take this from maximum security down to minimum security, we think there's a possibility we could come in at the $6 million we already have in the bank for this project. So they asked the committee to give them 90 days to do their research and get new pricing and redo the drawings. And then they're going to come back at the end of that 90 days. Actually, they said they'll come back every month and update them on their progress. But hopefully at the end of the 90 days, they can come back and say, hey, we can build this minimum security at $6 million. Maybe they come back and say we can do it for $6.5 million. We only need $500,000 instead of $2.4 million. So that's what's going on with that project now. So
Does it change any type of certification going from high security to minimum security, or is that a factor as far as the state goes, or has anybody even mentioned that?
They checked with the state. The state was fine with it. Apparently, we are already screening because we take in
Yeah,
because
the
we have a
issue. We're in the
facility. We
business.
take in DCS and
Yeah.
outside county kids. Apparently, we are already screening those kids, pre-screening them ahead of time, and if any of them are violent, have violent tendencies, are in custody for some kind of a severe something like a murder or whatever, we don't accept them already. So we're not accepting those type of kids that require a maximum security
I
facility
got.
currently.
I've heard some discussion since it's been reopened that
Yeah.
well, let's reevaluate our need for this. Okay, and we
Right.
talked about it last
We talked about
week.
that
We
last
gave some
week.
numbers: 2.8 per day from Bedford County.
I think it was like 2.3. But
2.3.
yeah, less than three
less
kids
than
a
three
day
kids a day from
the county.
Bedford County.
Yeah.
So I got into a discussion with somebody that was just casually bringing this up, and we had this question: Is juvenile detention an extension of education, or is it an extension of law enforcement?
That's a good question.
All right, I think that should determine how we move forward. Some
Right.
people view this as an education setup.
Right.
Okay. Well, if that was the case, the Board of Education would be dealing with this. But in fact, our city council, our county commission is, and they're looking at this and they're putting it to the detention center that we have, the judicial center.
Right.
The juvenile detention center is going to be built next to it. Okay. So that indicates this is an incarceration or actually law enforcement.
And they do have an education component when they're in there, but most of the kids that come into our facility, they're not there for 6 months,
Exactly.
3 months, 2 months. They're there for
Days.
2 days,
Yes.
3 days, 5 days, 15 days. I mean, we had months, we had the report last week that, the month of December, I think we had a total of 4 kids across the entire month. And most of them were in there, 2 or 3 days each time. So this is not, even though there is education going on there, while they're there, they make them
For
take
the
classes.
few days. What's the
yeah.
average visit? Like 12 days or so?
I do not know that number, but it's not. Yeah, it's a low number.
Low
Yeah, it's
number.
in the
Okay.
days.
So there's only so much educating you do in that
in
time
that amount
period.
of time.
And that gets back to the question of why are we doing this? Okay.
Mhm.
And then we've got Rutherford County, which we mentioned last week. They had
Right.
issues, but for the last 2 years, they've been open for business, got plenty of space.
They've got 65.
They can
beds
handle
for
3
theirs.
kids a day from us easy
Right.
because of that rotation going on. So, just common sense. The people are sitting here starting to think that it's, well, we don't need this. But we've already gone through and we've already going down that path.
We've
You
borrowed
can't
the
reverse
money,
now.
And yeah, the county commission approved it as part of that bundle. So it's kind of, if they fit in or that $6 million number when they get this new number back, there's nothing that would cause them to have to go back and revote.
I think
this.
they'll
So
get it. I think they'll get it under
I
that
think
number.
they'll find a way to get there.
Yeah.
So another interesting note, I just read this on one of the reports at the Financial Management Committee. I just thought I'd read it straight off the report because this is always curiosity to me. It said Liberty High School master plan has been approved and released to Klein Sweeney Architects to begin work. I didn't know that the school board had yet definitely approved Liberty High School. So I thought that was happening at this March this coming Saturday. Actually, they have a March retreat, they call it. And then I thought their master plan was being voted on at the end of March. So it seems like if we've already got Klein Sweeney working on it, I'd say Liberty High School is pretty much a done deal. It seems like at this point. So,
one thing Steve Jordan brought up,
Yeah.
we were talking about the juvenile detention center and the cost of it and the need for it when he posted this. And he said, and $4 million for our soccer field we don't need when our county roads are horrible. Our tax dollars are busy for nothing we need. Just to clarify, Steve, that is a city situation, not a county situation. And there's a huge grant that the city has had to match some with, and it's not $4 million. It's more like $750,000.
The city on the soccer facility, the city is spending $770,000,
Right.
and the balance of that is covered by the grant. They allowed us to apply the value of the land it's going on and call that our match, but we did not pay
$4 million.
whatever for that land. Yeah, whatever that dollar
Right.
amount is that they're applying is not.
We've
what
had
the
that
city
land
did.
for a long time.
That
Okay,
land was
so
already
Steve,
owned by
it's
the
not
city,
a county
yeah.
issue. The county's not doing that. The city is doing it, and they got a grant to pay for the majority of it. Now,
Yeah, and the math on that is we're going to end up with a $5 million soccer facility, and it's going to cost $770,000. So, and I realize, and I've seen a lot of this same chatter online, $770,000, whatever the cost is.
could
like,
color something else.
we could always spend it on roads. We could spend on, there's always something you could spend
Right.
money on better. We could feed the hungry and, save the
Right.
children in Africa or whatever with the money. But the city, one of the services that the city provides is Parks and Recreation. That's one of our major departments. I mean,
Yeah.
we've got police, we got fire, we got Public Works, we got the Cemetery Department, but Parks and Recreation is a big part of what the
Right.
city provides to the residents. And $5 million worth of product in that department for $770,000.
Pretty good leverage on your money.
Not
isn't it?
a bad
Yeah,
investment. And, again, we could go into, you can do whatever with the money.
back
But
to
there's
Steve's-
a reason that
Yeah.
department's there. Other than cutting that department off and no longer offering Parks and Recreation, you've got to fund it somehow.
Okay, so
So-
back to Steve's point, it's not taking money away from county roads.
No, it has nothing to do with
with
the county at all. Yeah,
so
that's all in
Steve,
the
it's
city budget.
it's all
So,
city, and it's not going to affect county
Yeah.
diverting money.
Yeah, or roads for that matter. So, continuing on financial report for the county, property tax revenue is running $1.4 million ahead of last year. Property tax revenue is one that always varies from year to year, depending on when people pay their bill. But as we're getting further into the year, we're now past the deadline for property taxes.
Right.
That's starting to feel like a good number that we're still
Yeah.
staying ahead. Sales tax revenue, which is up 1.02 million ahead of last year, and that's really good news. That means that that number being up is good. That means we've got more money coming into the city and the county. So
Yeah.
they also at that meeting approved a budget amendment to add the county morgue to the surplus building. So that was kind of another weird one, just dollar wise. The week before it was like, we need 200,000, maybe 220. And then we ended up at 260 somehow. I think they're still really not sure, and they even said this, they still really aren't sure the actual number, but I guess they're wanting to move ahead, so they picked a number. So 260 is the number they came up with. One of those things that just came up where Vanderbilt Hospital no longer accepts out-of-hospital
Right.
deaths in their morgue. We've got to deal with them on the
Right.
county side. 260,000 doesn't seem like an unreasonable cost for that. Is not going to affect anybody's taxes. They actually talked to the comptroller's office. They allowed them a move that I was told was not allowed, which is they're just taking money straight out of debt service and using it to pay for this expense. They're line iteming it and calling it interest revenue. They're taking some of the interest they're making on all the money they have in the bank and just sliding it over into the account.
And Steve came back and he's talking about his point. We could be doing things that could be better for Shelville in the county. That's $770,000. I'm sure is what he's talking about there.
Yeah.
But also on social media, on Facebook specifically, I saw a lot of people talking about this morgue. Okay.
Yeah.
And why the hospital, why wouldn't they take them anymore? I think people are confused. We don't have Bedford County General Hospital anymore.
No.
This is a private company.
Right.
And it's monetarily, it's tearing into them. They're about profit. They have to
Sure.
make a profit to keep their door open. So they stopped. They made the decision to stop housing because we were getting flooded with bodies and they don't even have room for their own. Okay.
I hesitate to say flooded with bodies. I think they only have space for two is what I
right.
heard. So yeah,
You don't have room for them. So
yeah, there's not. a lot
So
of
there
room
has
there.
to be
So,
somewhere, because the way it's working out in Bedford County right now is at the time of death. Typically, a family would contact a funeral home to take care of that, and there's some they're just left, not
right.
getting done.
Yeah, some of them sit there for
and
several
it's
days or
like-
longer.
Yeah,
so,
and some for not. They never happen. So
right.
that's for the county's got to deal with it somehow.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, you're not just gonna, stick them in a closet somewhere. I mean, you've got
Exactly.
to have a facility. So, and this,
And
not a huge, in the big scheme of the county
No,
budget, it's not a
based
huge,
on
not a
what-
huge amount, and it's not going to cost any tax dollars. They're going to get it out of interest, so it doesn't seem like that bad of a deal. So, last thing they discussed at that meeting was the flock cameras, which the city recently started bringing those into the city. It seems like the county's going to. Everybody's on board with bringing them into the county, but it does cost some money, and they've got to find out if they can squeeze, I think there were two different options, 20-some thousand or 40-some thousand out of the current county budget, or if they're going to have to do a budget amendment, or do they push it off? The new budget starts in July. Do they just wait till the next budget? So there's still some back and forth. So they deferred that one more month so the finance director could look into funding and how they would fund that.
Yeah.
So
That sounds like a good program based on everything that I've heard with the city and other
everybody
areas.
is really, everybody I've talked to in law enforcement is really excited about it and feels like it's going to be a good thing. So I think at some point it's going to happen, and probably pretty soon. I think they'll find a way to squeeze it into this year's budget. It's not, again, 20 some or 40 some $1,000. I'm sure they can finagle a couple line items and get that in there somewhere. So Wednesday, I went with my friends at the Rosenwald Center to a luncheon. I found they had a little program they presented, which something I didn't know, being a new resident. I was going to ask you if you had ever heard of the Bedford County Training
Absolutely.
School. Was that during your time living
No,
here?
that was before. That was in the
Is that-
50s and 60s. They
Yep.
had Bedford County Training School had a high school.
Yep.
Okay, and they had a high school football team that basically never got beat for like
That's
6 years in a row, 8
That's
years in a row.
Exactly what it was. They set a national record. They went 82 wins, 0 losses, and 4 ties. From 1943 to 1950, they lost to nobody. So
No.
nobody. And they played
Nobody
a bunch-
wanted to play them.
I don't think anybody wants to play a team like that. So at this luncheon, actually, they had 10 former football players from the Bedford County Training School. They came to the luncheon, they presented them, and they took some pictures and stuff like that.
They
So-
recognize them every year at Sheffield Central High School
Okay.
during halftime of one of the games. And
Yeah.
there's several players out there this year. There's about 12 or 13 of them.
Yeah.
And out of this pool of players, Jim Mitchell was a tight end for the Atlanta Falcons. He played
Yeah.
with Harris Middle. And there's several others that went on to have college careers and so forth.
Right.
But a lot of talent on that team. Nobody wanted to mess with them.
Yeah, a team that hasn't lost in 86 games.
And it
that's
wasn't
not
like-
the team you want to play.
And
so.
it wasn't a lot of close games.
Oh, that was the other thing. They said there was a period, and I forget the
They
time
get
period.
scored
like,
on for like,
Well, that was like 2 years. I think they said there was no team advanced past the
50,
50-yard
yeah,
line.
exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, they were a force to be reckoned with. And it's crazy that there's still some of them are still alive.
Oh, yeah.
So they're getting up fairly old now.
Yeah.
But they were
43 to 50. Okay, 1943 to 50.
Yeah.
They I think they dissolved in the early 60s.
in the 60s. And I think
Yeah.
most of the guys that were still there,
They were in
still
the
alive, would have been
60s,
more
yeah,
out of the
yeah.
60s. Because if you were on the 1950 team, that's 75 years ago, you'd be about 90 now.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah.
also those teams from the 60s, they had similar records, but they
Right.
didn't string 82 in a row like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like unreal.
Yeah, and they said this record held for years and years. I think eventually, recently, there was a team that went 83, but that record held for a long time.
Yeah.
So, and that's right here in Bedford County, so it's kind of
Yeah.
neat. It was a neat piece of history I didn't know about. So, Thursday evening was our city planning commission, and that's one I sit on, and that's the one actually I was most looking forward to this week. And just a couple things happened there. We had an R4 rezoning on the bypass that passed by a 6-1 vote. We had 1 no, and his concern, and I share a little bit of his concern, is we're putting too much high density into the city. So this particular project has 2 access points, one on the bypass, one on McDale Lane. So it's fairly well positioned for that. It's not going to cause a traffic issue because it's got so much road access. But I do understand his concern and why I voted no. The big thing was that I've been looking forward to, which we've been working on amendments to the city zoning ordinance for the past 12 months. And we've talked about this extensively over the almost year that we've been sitting here doing the show, which is we're getting too much of this high density, low quality, low amenity development coming into the city of Shelbyville. So this was just a small step. I've been trying to get any step. We've had no steps taken. We've made no progress on fighting this. So we took a very small step, which was to double the open space requirement in a high density neighborhood from 10% to 20%.
That's it.
That's at least a step. It was, again,
Okay.
that's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's making some kind of motion forward when we've had none for years
Right.
and years and years.
Do you
And-
think we'll ever see where lot size is talked about in this, or spacing of homes?
Yes,
not
we've
10
got-
feet, not
yes,
10 feet.
we've got, unfortunately, and it was supposed to be on this agenda. He wasn't able to get it done, our planning director. We were supposed to discuss PUDs on this agenda and get some side setback adjustments as well. I'm told and promised that we're going to get to those next month, but rather than hold up these other, the one thing that we did have almost ready, we went ahead and moved the one thing that was ready on, because even though we got this out of the planning commission, it now has to go to the city council twice before it becomes law. So the earliest this could still happen is,
May. June.
we're going to vote on it in March. We would vote on it if it passes in March. We'll vote on it again in April. And then if it passes in April, I think there's a 15-day waiting period. So it could happen as early as, late April.
Okay, that's one small step.
One
like you
small
said.
step, but it's better than zero, which is
Right.
where we've been at. So I'm hopeful that the council sees that and continues to move it forward. This 20% number, when we initially started talking about this a year ago, we were just going to jump our 10% up to 15% because that's what Franklin does. But as I did more research, because I had a lot of time, because it was taking us a year to get around to this, I found that in Nolensville, which is fighting, a lot more aggressive growth, they've already gone to 30% on their number on mixed use developments. And in Thompson Station, which is a much smaller community than we are now, but they're got a lot of people want to come in there because they're a rural kind of community. They've gone to 45% required green space, open space, to try to keep their neighborhoods from getting too
You
dense.
start seeing all these entities, all these municipalities, whether it be a county or city or whatever, they're starting to say, hey, wait a minute.
Right.
We're messing up here. We've messed up. Murfreesboro will admit they've had a debacle for the last 20 years
Right.
of what's going on. We should take some sort of common sense from their mistake and apply it here.
Right.
I mean, we've got a lot of issues that have already a lot of things that have happened that we're going to see come apart. I'm afraid down the road,
Yeah.
a few years down the road, and we can't back up and change it, but we can move forward in the right direction.
We can keep moving in that direction. That was the whole goal here, was just to take a step. There's actually a school of thought. I heard this on a couple of podcasts. I did a little bit of research on it. It's called Massive Imperfect Action. And the idea is you see a goal, it's way off in the distance. You might not know how to get to that goal immediately, but if you're at least making motion, small steps in that general direction, not every step is going to be perfect. But if you're what happens with people, what happens with these committees, what happens with city councils, is they get so tied up in their head about what's the perfect next step that they get paralyzed and they don't take any steps. They take zero steps.
And what's the title of this again? What was it labeled?
Massive Imperfect Action.
Okay,
So-
Massive Imperfect Action.
so-
I've seen that in play for a long
So
time.
if you actually at least take steps headed toward your goal, and maybe not every step is the right step, but if you're moving, if you're making motion, at some point you're going to get to your goal. But if you just sit around and wait for what's that perfect next step, you're just paralyzed.
Exactly.
You don't move anywhere, and your goal stays way over here, and you're over here, and you've made no motion at all.
Perfection doesn't really exist.
Yeah, don't always. Yeah, if it's some kind of motion, moving in the right direction. Not every step's going to be the right step, but if we keep moving there, hopefully we get there eventually.
That's a good way to wind down the weekly report.
And that is
here.
the end of this
I know.
week's.
Good
and
way to-
and we're going to go into next week. But before we do that, I think we're going to hear from our sponsor one more time.
Get the results you want with the personalized service you deserve at Dennis Young Insurance Agency.
As a local independent agency, we offer coverage from several different companies, including Erie. So whether it's auto, home, life, personal, or business, we can find the right coverage to meet your unique insurance needs. And with a rate lock advantage, your rates won't go up as long as you do not change drivers, autos, or addresses. Contact us at Dennis Young Insurance Agency, insuring Shelbyville and surrounding areas since 19.
All righty, welcome back to the weekend wrap up, and we're about to wrap up. It's been a long show, Josh, but we've covered a lot of ground.
We had a lot that went on this past week. Now, in the upcoming week, we're going to have just the opposite. We have one whole meeting between the city and the county. Actually, I heard from somebody at the county last weekend, said, why'd you pick on the county the whole show? I said, all we had was county meetings. I didn't have anything else to talk about. So in the upcoming week, we've only got one meeting, and it's a city meeting. So next time, we'll only have city stuff to talk about. And what we've got Tuesday evening, 6 o'clock, is our monthly city council study session. It is a fairly packed agenda. We'll cover a couple items real quick, and then we'll cover them more in depth next week. We're looking at adding an EV charger and parking, 4 parking spaces dedicated to electric vehicles at the city parking lot across from the Fly building. So I guess there's enough of them Teslas in town that they're going to give them somewhere to park and charge. So maybe that's the discussion.
We'll be prepared.
We'll be prepared. Shelbyville Power will be the one putting in the charging station. Obviously, this is very close to their headquarters there on that street. So I don't see the packet was huge again this month. I just barely had time to glance at it. I don't think there's any cost in this to the city. I think this is all covered. So I think this is probably a no-brainer. Riverview District Phase 2, we're going to start that discussion. That's why they took us on the field trip this past week. That's why they gave us a free dinner, because they're probably going to start asking for money soon. So we're going to, I don't think we're going to get a dollar amount at this meeting yet, but they're going to at least discuss what's involved in Phase 2. And then I think they'll put some of that out for bid and come back with dollars later. We're going to probably approve requesting an additional year from the state on the River Overlook project. It was current. The current way it's set up is it had to be finished, I believe, August of 2025. There's no way we're going to meet that deadline, so we're going to ask for a 1-year extension. Another one that interests me, and I've just heard some side rumor talk on this, and I'm going to be interested in the discussion. Century Mold, which is one of our good employers here in town, they're going to come to us with another pilot request. This is that payment in lieu of taxes.
Right.
This used to all happen at the IDB board. We had a set of standards that were given to the IDB board. They looked at these requests, decided if it met the standards, gave the business the pilot, or didn't give the business the pilot, depending on if it met the standards. And as far as I know, everyone that requested them got them. I think everybody knew what the standards were. It was pretty simple. So recently, the city council decided they didn't like that process because of some of the pilots that were given out, and we'll go ahead and throw a name out in particular, Duxon. They didn't like the amount of a tax break that they got with their project. So now every single one of these pilots has to come before the city council to be discussed. What I've heard on this one in particular, and I'll do more digging and we'll hear more at the study session, is they're going to ask for a tax break to bring new equipment into their business, but they have no intention of adding new employees. So this will be a tax break on that equipment for either, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, for a number of years where they wouldn't pay taxes on that. I've got some concerns about that.
If there's no expansion,
if there's no addition of employees, what benefit is the city getting? The argument I've heard back already is, hey, if you don't give it to them, maybe they take their jobs and go elsewhere. But then, I'm looking from the fact we've got a lot of other businesses in town that are doing good things and expanding. I mean, do we want every single one of them coming to the council and saying, hey, I don't want to pay property taxes for the next 7 years? It seems like there's a little, some stuff at least worth discussing here. So I'm going to be interested in what the presentation is on Tuesday. We're going to go back and retry again animal control ordinance. Last time this was brought up at a study session, it didn't go anywhere. We had additional issues after that study session where we had dogs on chains that we were getting contacted by people about that were left out there. It was, 20 degrees. The dog was tied up. They didn't have adequate, shelter, or the neighbor felt like they didn't have adequate shelter. So we're just looking for some kind of a balance there to where we can protect our animals without costing the city a huge amount of money. And we're not big enough. We cannot afford to have 10 animal control officers running 24 hours a day looking for dogs in the city. I mean, we just don't have that kind of a budget, and we're not that big of an area. So there's got to be some kind of middle ground where we can protect our animals without spending a ton of taxpayer dollars. Because as we've heard from people online today, we got roads that need paved.
Right.
We've got so many other things that need to be done. There'll be discussion on a tourism grant for the Cowboy Mounted Shooter Extravaganza at Cooper Steel. I think we give them a little bit of a grant every year. If people don't know, the city collects about $300,000 a year in hotel motel tax, which is paid by people from out of town that come into town, stay in either hotel motel or an Airbnb. I think they pay that tax as well.
Right.
And we use part of that money to give these small little $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 donations to events that are bringing tourists into town. That's the idea of the money, is to bring more people in. Yeah. And then final item, we'll be voting on those zoning ordinances we just talked about, and hopefully the city council will be on board with that, because I think all of us are looking for ways to bring smarter growth, better neighborhoods into the city. And again, this is a tiny step, but at least it's a step, and it gets us going in some kind of direction. Right. So, and currently we ain't been doing nothing. We've been doing nothing. We've been standing still. So we got to start moving. So, and with that, that's what's coming up in the upcoming week. I think we might be back here at the same time, same place, same channel.
You might
next
have
week.
A special guest with you next week.
I think there might be a special guest here next week. You'll just have to tune in and see. But we'll be here at 10 o'clock next week with the news that matters here in Shelbyville and Bedford County. So
See you next week.
Come back and see us.